My neighbor had been drilling through our shared wall for 3 months. The camera was pointed directly at my bedroom, but that is not even the most disturbing part of this story. Let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Lisa. I am 34 years old. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and 11 months ago a maintenance worker fixing a pipe in my bedroom wall found something that ended my ability to feel safe in any room I cannot completely account for. My neighbor and I shared a wall, a standard townhouse arrangement, 2 units, one shared structural wall running the length of both properties. The maintenance worker's name was Pete, and he had been in my bedroom for 40 minutes when he came to find me in the kitchen and said he needed to show me something. What Pete showed me was a hole approximately the diameter of a pencil that had been drilled from my neighbor's side of the shared wall, and that terminated just behind the baseboard trim on my side, positioned at an angle that would have allowed a lens placed in the hole to capture a significant portion of my bedroom. The hole was clean and deliberate. It had not been drilled by accident. There was residue on my side of the baseboard that suggested the drilling had happened in stages over time. Not a single session but multiple sessions across what Pete estimated was several weeks to several months. I stood in my bedroom and I looked at a pencil-width hole in my baseboard, and I understood that someone had spent weeks to months drilling through a shared wall to be able to see into my room. My neighbor's name was Dennis. He was 47 years old and had lived in the adjacent unit for 2 years. He had always been quiet in the way I had attributed to introversion. I called the police before I said anything to Dennis. The police came within the hour. They executed a search of Dennis's unit and found camera equipment consistent with the hole. A small lens and a recording device that had been operational and that had stored footage. The footage existed. The police took the device. I was told by the detective assigned to my case that the footage covered approximately 3 months of my bedroom. 3 months. Dennis was arrested that evening. He was charged with criminal surveillance and invasion of privacy. His case was resolved through a plea agreement that included a prison sentence, registration requirements, and a restraining order. I moved out of my unit within a week. I could not sleep there after knowing what the hole had been for, and I did not try to make myself. The wall was repaired by the property management company, and I was released from my lease without penalty, because the property management company understood that what had happened in that wall was not something a tenant should be required to continue living next to. I live in a different apartment now on a different street. The first thing I did in my new apartment was walk every wall and every baseboard and every corner with a flashlight. I found nothing, and I do not expect to find anything, and I still check every 3 months because checking is something I do now, and I think it is something I will do for a long time. Update: 4 months later. Dennis began his prison sentence last month. His attorney had argued for the minimum on the basis of his prior clean record. The prosecutor had presented 3 months of recorded footage as evidence of the sustained and deliberate nature of what he had done. The judge agreed with the prosecutor's characterization. I submitted a victim impact statement. I described what it means to learn that a space you have lived in as private was not private for months you cannot recover, and cannot make unknown. I said that the harm of surveillance is not only in the watching, but in the retroactive knowledge of having been watched, and that the retroactive knowledge is something you carry regardless of what was or was not done with what was seen. The judge read the statement into the record. Dennis was in the room when it was read. I was not. Some things you write for the record rather than for the room. And that was just the beginning, because story 2 is something I still cannot fully explain. I found something hidden in my wall that had been there for 30 years, and the last entry was written for whoever found it. That person was me. Let's get into it. My name is Thomas. I am 41 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington, and 2 years ago I was renovating my basement and found a journal hidden inside the wall cavity behind a section of old paneling I was removing. The journal was a standard composition notebook. It was not old enough to be historically significant. The cover design was recognizable as something from the 1990s, and it was not new enough to have been placed recently. It had been in that wall for somewhere between 25 and 35 years by the condition of the binding. I sat on my basement floor and I opened it. The journal belonged to a teenager. The handwriting was clearly adolescent. The concerns were adolescent. The dates in the entries were from the early 1990s. A boy named Michael had lived in my house as a teenager and had kept a journal in his bedroom wall cavity. And I was reading it 30 years later in what had been his bedroom, but was now my basement renovation project. I read the full journal that afternoon. It was specific and honest in the way of teenage journals that are written for the self rather than any anticipated reader, his family, his school, his friendships, his anxieties, the specific texture of a young person's interior life in the early 1990s that was both dated and completely recognizable. The entries ran from 1991 to 1994. The last entry was dated in the spring of 1994. I read the last entry 3 times before I understood what it said. The last entry described the house, the specific layout of rooms, the way light came through the basement window in the afternoon, the sound the stairs made when you walked on them at night. It described the house in the present tense as though Michael was still in it. And then the last sentence of the last entry said something that I have thought about every day since. It said, someday someone else will live here and find this, and I want them to know this house was good to me. I sat in the basement of a house I had owned for 4 years, and I read a sentence that had been written for me before I existed in this context by a teenager in 1994, and I felt something I do not have adequate language for. I searched for Michael through the property records and the school records available in public archives. I found him. He was 50 years old and lived in a city 3 hours away and had a professional profile I was able to find online. I sent him a letter. I told him I had found his journal. I told him his house was good to me too. He called me 2 weeks after I sent the letter. He was quiet for a moment when I answered, and then he said he had hidden that journal in 1994 and had never expected anyone to find it. I told him I had found it in a wall cavity during a renovation. He said he had put it there because he had needed a place that was only his. I told him I understood that. We talked for an hour. He told me about the house as it had been in the early 1990s. I told him about the house as it was now. Between us we had a complete picture of a house across 40 years, and the 2 people it had been good to. Update, 3 months later. Michael came to see the house last month. He stood in the doorway of what had been his bedroom, now my renovated basement guest room. And he was quiet for a long time. Then he said the window was the same. I told him I had kept the original windows when I renovated because they were good quality, and he said that was the right call. We had coffee upstairs and he told me about his life since 1994 and I told him about mine. And at some point he said he was glad I had sent the letter. I said I was glad I had found the journal. He asked if he could see it. I gave it to him. He held it for a long time without opening it, and then he put it in his jacket pocket, and I understood that it belonged with him, and that I had been the person who found it for him rather than the person it was for. He left in the afternoon. The basement guest room is mine. The journal is his. The house continues to be good to whoever lives in it, and I think that is the right thing for a house to be. I know. Take a moment. Because story 3 is even closer to home. My new roommate knew things about my life I had never told her. Not 1 thing. Not 2 things. 11 things. Here is how she knew. My name is Sandra. I am 29 years old. I live in Chicago, Illinois, and 14 months ago I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate I had found through a housing platform. Her name was Claire and she was 27 years old and she had seemed through the application process, through our initial conversations, through the walkthrough we had done together, like an entirely normal person making entirely normal housing decisions. By the end of the second week, I had begun to notice that Claire knew things about my daily routine that I had not told her. Small things. She knew I went to a specific coffee shop every morning. I had not mentioned my coffee shop. She knew I had a phone call with my sister every Sunday evening. I had not mentioned my sister or our Sunday calls. She knew I had been having trouble sleeping. I had not mentioned this to her, but I had mentioned it in a voice message to my friend Dana that I had recorded in my bedroom with the door closed. I began documenting the references. By the end of week 4 I had 11 entries in my documentation. 11 things Claire had referenced that she could not have known through normal cohabitation. I contacted Thomas, the cybersecurity consultant I had been referred to by a friend, and Thomas came to my apartment on a Saturday when Claire was out. Thomas spent 3 hours going through the apartment. He found 2 things. The first was a small audio device, a commercial recording device available online for approximately $40, that had been placed inside the ventilation cover in the hallway between our 2 bedrooms. The device had a range sufficient to capture conversations in both bedrooms through the open ventilation system. The second was that Claire had accessed my phone's cloud backup through a credential she had apparently obtained by watching me enter my phone password during our first week of cohabitation, and then accessing my cloud account from her own device. She had been reading my messages and listening to my space for 4 weeks. I called the police and my attorney before I confronted Claire. My attorney advised me to document everything Thomas had found before doing anything else, and to ensure the evidence was preserved properly. The police came and removed the device and documented the cloud access. Claire was confronted by police rather than by me. She was charged with eavesdropping and unauthorized computer access. She moved out within the week. The charges were processed through the criminal system and resulted in a conviction, and a fine and a requirement for supervised probation. I replaced all of my cloud passwords and enabled 2-factor authentication on every account. I have a new roommate now who has been in the apartment for 8 months. I checked the ventilation covers before she moved in. I check them monthly. I will check them for as long as I live in a shared space because I have learned that $40 and a ventilation cover can produce a surveillance situation that is not visible until someone who knows what to look for. Update 4 months later. Claire's probation requires periodic check-ins with a supervisory officer and prohibits her from accessing any shared housing through online platforms for the duration. I found this out through my attorney who had tracked the case outcome. Thomas told me last month that the device Claire had used was the same model he had found in 3 other cases in the past year, and that the accessibility and affordability of commercial surveillance equipment was something he thought people should understand better than they did. I told him I understood it considerably better than I had 14 months ago. He said that was the best possible outcome of a bad situation. I said I agreed, and that I was still checking my ventilation covers every month, and that I intended to keep doing so. He said that was exactly the right practice. Some knowledge you receive at a cost that you then carry as protection, and I am carrying this one carefully. Sandra installed 2 locks. After that. But story 4 is about someone who was already inside. Someone I had invited in. Every single week. Let's find out what she caught. On camera. My name is Patricia. I am 46 years old. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and 16 months ago I set up a security camera in my living room not because I was suspicious of anything specific, but because I had read an article about home security and had decided that having a record of what happened in my home while I was away was a reasonable precaution. The camera was visible. I had not attempted to conceal it, and I had informed my cleaning service that security cameras were present in the home as required by my state's notice requirements. The cleaning service sent different employees on different weeks, and I had built a comfortable relationship with the service over 2 years without incident. What the camera showed me on the third week after installation was an employee named Marcus who had been with the service for approximately 18 months, and who, on this particular visit, spent 47 minutes cleaning and 14 additional minutes going through the contents of my home office desk drawers while believing he was not being recorded. The desk drawers contain the following items that Marcus handled, photographed with his own phone and replaced: my social security card, 2 recent bank statements, my passport, a folder containing insurance documents including my policy numbers and personal information, and a notebook containing account login information I had written down and should not have kept in an accessible location. I watched the footage the evening of the visit. I called my attorney and my bank before I called the cleaning service. My attorney told me to preserve the footage and not to alert the cleaning service until I had protected my financial accounts. I changed my bank passwords, froze my credit, reported my social security number as potentially compromised to the relevant federal agencies, and changed every account credential in the notebook. A process that took 4 hours and that I will not allow to be necessary again because the notebook no longer exists. Then I called the cleaning service. The cleaning service's response was professional and immediate. Marcus was terminated. The service cooperated fully with the police investigation. Marcus was charged with criminal invasion of privacy and identity theft preparation. The latter charge based on the photographing of my documents with intent to use or distribute. His case is ongoing. I have had no fraudulent accounts opened in my name. The credit freeze and the rapid credential changes appear to have prevented whatever Marcus had intended to do with the photographs. I have a new cleaning service. I informed them of the camera at the outset. The first 3 visits have been recorded and have shown nothing except efficient and professional cleaning. I keep my personal documents in a locked box that requires a key I carry with me. I do not keep account credentials written down anywhere in my home. I have learned what my home security camera was actually for, and it was not what I had originally thought when I installed it. Update: 4 months later. Marcus's case concluded last month with a guilty plea to the invasion of privacy charge. The identity theft preparation charge was reduced as part of the plea agreement. He received probation and a requirement to cooperate with the investigation into whether he had done similar things at other properties he had cleaned. The investigation found 2 other homeowners who had experienced fraudulent account activity following cleaning visits by the same service during the period Marcus had been employed. Both are pursuing civil claims. I was contacted by the investigating officer, who told me that my camera footage had been the evidence that had made the broader investigation possible, and that without it the pattern would not have been identifiable. I told him I had installed the camera on a precautionary basis after reading an article. He said that was fortunate timing. I said I thought so too, and that I would never not have a camera in my home again, and that the $14 a month for cloud storage of the footage was the best money I spent on this house. Patricia's camera changed everything. But story 5 is the one that kept me up at night, because this started the day a relationship ended, and went on for 2 full years, before anyone said a word. Let's get into it. My ex-boyfriend had been creating fake social media profiles of me for 2 years. I found out when a stranger messaged me. My name is Angela. I am 32 years old. I live in Houston, Texas, and 18 months ago I received a message from a woman I had never met who said she wanted to warn me about something, and that she hoped I would hear her out before blocking her. I did not block her. I heard her out. The woman's name was Karen, and she had been in a relationship with a man named Daniel for 6 months, and had recently discovered that Daniel had been maintaining several fake social media profiles using my photographs and my name and personal details he had assembled from my actual accounts. Karen had found the profiles when she had searched Daniel's browser history after a conversation that had made her suspicious about him. The profiles had been operational for 2 years. 2 years of fake accounts using my face and my name that I had not known existed. Daniel was my ex-boyfriend. We had dated for 14 months and broken up 2 years before Karen contacted me, which meant he had begun creating the fake profiles approximately at the time of our breakup or shortly after. The profiles had been used in ways I will describe briefly, and without full detail because the full detail is not something I need to put into permanent text. He had used them to interact with other people online while presenting as me. He had built relationships with strangers using my identity. He had made statements and taken positions and conducted interactions that were attributed to me without my knowledge or consent. Karen had found 4 profiles. The investigation that followed found 7. I hired an attorney named Patricia who specialized in online harassment, and a digital forensics investigator named Thomas who spent 3 weeks documenting the profiles, their content, their activity history, and the evidence connecting them to Daniel. The documentation was 46 pages. I filed a civil suit and a criminal complaint simultaneously. The criminal complaint resulted in charges under Texas's online impersonation statute, a law that makes it a criminal offense to create a fictitious profile of another person without their consent, and with the intent to harm or defraud. Daniel's attorney tried several defenses. None of them survived the 46 pages of documentation, and the evidence Thomas had assembled. Daniel was convicted. He received a sentence that included jail time, a fine, and a permanent restraining order prohibiting any online or physical contact with me. The civil judgment required him to pay damages that my attorney described as appropriate, and that I received as the financial acknowledgement of 2 years of harm that would not have been possible to fully compensate regardless of the amount. Karen and I have stayed in contact. She is no longer with Daniel. That had ended the evening she found his browser history. She has told me that what she did in messaging me was the hardest thing she had done in recent memory, and that she had not known if I would believe her, or if I would respond, and that she had decided the risk of me not believing her was smaller than the cost of not trying. I told her she had been right about that calculation, and that I was grateful she had made it. We have coffee occasionally. We are, in the specific way of people whose lives intersected through the actions of someone who had no right to connect them, genuinely glad to know each other. I think about 2 years of profiles I did not know existed sometimes. I think about my face and my name being used for 2 years by someone I had trusted, and I think about Karen searching a browser history and deciding to message a stranger. And I think that the most important moment in the whole story was the moment Karen decided to try. Update. 4 months later. Daniel's restraining order is active and has not been violated in 18 months. My attorney monitors for new profiles as part of the ongoing civil judgment enforcement, a service she provides because the judgment included a provision requiring Daniel to certify quarterly that no new profiles exist. The quarterly certifications have been submitted. Thomas runs a periodic check to verify them. So far they have been accurate. Karen and I had coffee last month. She has been in therapy working through what she experienced in that relationship, and she told me she was doing better than she had been 6 months ago, which she described as significant progress. I told her I thought it was. We talked for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with Daniel, and everything to do with who we were outside of what had happened to us. And I thought that that was the right kind of conversation to be having, and that having it with someone who understood the specific context without requiring explanation was a specific kind of ease that I was